This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland went to the lane, locked to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Hello and welcome to the Chase Down Pod. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including FanDuel Sports Network without cable. There is no cost and there is no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. There's also no Justin Rowan. We got a sick boy, a sick lad with us. It goes to show. The Cavs finally lose a game and he ducks the smoke. Just kidding. He's actually super bummed because he loves being on after losses. He loves a body to dissect. But have no fear. I'm not here alone. You don't have to hear me drone for 40 straight minutes. We've got host of Locked On Cavs and the Inside Shot on Substack, Danny Cunningham. How you doing, buddy?
I'm well, man. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
Oh, doing fine and dandy. Going through, doing bedtime solo tonight, so we're just blasting from thing to thing to thing. But, we're feeling good. And I was thinking, Danny, because yesterday we had an afternoon matinee loss. And those are always a little weird because you just kind of have to sit with the rest of the day, And I was thinking that, so I started out fine with the loss overall. But then I thought about it more and I was getting grumpy. And I realized that I am functionally like the president of a homeowners association in a nice neighborhood. I'm really, my problems aren't too serious. But to me, they feel serious, It's been such a weird year where, you just have no sense. There's so little to poke at that, a loss like that where they had the game well in hand and then, blow it down the stretch does feel kind of jarring.
It feels so strange to even talk about losses and doing it on my own podcast. How do I approach this? Because listen, it's not as if during this 16-game winning streak, we can't sit here and act like every single game that they won during that streak was perfect basketball. I think they actually had one of their worst weeks of the season and they went 4-0 in that week, which is an incredible and remarkable thing. And I think really does speak to their greatness that they were able to find ways to win games that they didn't necessarily play their best. But the way I look at it is they had a really bad shooting day. That's going to happen. It doesn't happen to them very often because they're such a good shooting team. And Orlando, a team that's a pretty awful shooting team, had one of its best shooting days of the season. And though that combination just sunk them for an afternoon, I don't think that loss is anything that is repeatable. I don't think it's anything to be worried about. I just think, hey, sometimes when you play 82 games, a game like that's going to happen. And for this team to be where they're at 56-11, the fact that they haven't had many of those is kind of incredible too.
Yeah, I mean, they are now a lowly 48-1 after heading into the fourth quarter with the lead. I was really, by the way, talk about, the small tragedies. I was really excited for that one to be didn't lose a game all year heading into the playoffs with a lead in the fourth quarter. I was excited for them to have that stat in their back pocket. So, I don't know. It is one of those things where there's been so few losses. There's been so few poor, like straight up just poor performances, that it is hard to kind of analyze what's real and what's not. Was this just a shooting variance loss in your opinion, or do you think there was some stuff for the Cavs to pull out of it?
I mean, I think it's never one thing, right? Like if you look at any of the other 10 games they've lost, incredible. If you look at those, like it's never just one thing that necessarily goes wrong. And anytime a team loses a game, you can't point to one thing. I think that the shooting variance is the biggest part of that, because look at some of the shots that the Cavs were able to generate on Sunday. Like Sam Merrill had how many 3-pointers where he could have kind of checked for wind inside of Rocket Arena. And those are shots that you're going to expect Sam to make. He's been shooting almost 50% on threes from February 1st onward. Like he's been awesome lately, just didn't have a great day. Donovan Mitchell goes 3 of 14 from 3. You expect Donovan to shoot the basketball better than that. Like I think the shooting variance is the biggest thing. I thought the turnovers, certainly the ones at the end of the third quarter where Ty loses the ball twice, Donovan loses it once, like that was, I thought, a really big swing, because Sam had one of those threes. It was in the right corner that if that goes in, the Cavs are up by 11 with 2 minutes left in the third quarter. Instead, that doesn't go in. There's a foul. The Magic split the free throws and then create 3 quick turnovers, and the game's tied. Like I think that is the ultimate sliding doors moment, if you will, of that game. But I think the shooting is probably the biggest thing that just went wrong. Not to say they were perfect. The ball movement could have been better. They haven't played necessarily their best offensive basketball this season last month. I think they're 15th in March in offense, but overall, it's just like, if they make a few shots that we're used to seeing them make, that they've made all season long, they win that game by 10 to 15 points and no one even thinks twice about it.
Yeah, I do think it is worth kind of keying in on that turnover laden kind of stretch, because I do think they win the game without it. A 10-0 run when you're kind of in firm control of the game does. And, I do think if you're Orlando, you went from we're just hanging on to we think we got this now. We think we can hang. And they've just had the season from hell. I mean, after the 40-point drubbing, I kind of compared their arc to where this team was a year ago, where you have your really fun breakout, and then the year after you just have a dump truck of bad luck. Everyone's hurt, even when they're playing they're not whole and all that stuff. And but like they're still a team that with a lot of pride, especially coming out of that first round series last year. And I do think that is kind of where the game changed. I think Mosley gets a lot of credit for springing in out of nowhere full court press that I certainly was not ready for. And it sure didn't seem the Cavs were either. I gotta ask, we have seen more often than not that when the Cavs have trouble, when they are knocked out of their rhythm, Justin, I'll represent my dear sweet co-host who's laid up right now and saying that, the national media always points to long wings being what bother the Cavs. And Justin has always kind of persisted that, no, it's ball pressure. The Cavs don't like it when people are up in their grill. And how does Orlando turn this game? It's ball pressure. And like, how much of that do you think is kind of one of these flaws that the team just isn't super well built to handle? How much of that is just Evan not being there to be an outlet and a release valve when that pressure comes? Like, how much do you index on that? Because I still am not sure.
So I think it kind of depends where the ball pressure is. Like I view the 94 feet ball pressure type of a thing is something that's not super concerning when the postseason arrives, because, and it's happened. I can count probably 4 of their losses, the one on Sunday, the one against Indiana, and both of them against Atlanta, where you saw that, right, where
Houston
those teams
too.
wanted to pressure.
I'll throw the Houston losses in as well.
Yeah, certainly the loss
so crazy
in Houston.
We can just be
I think
that exact loss, because there's so few.
I don't think the one in Cleveland where they scored, I think it was 132 points in a loss necessarily counts against Houston, but the one in Houston does. And that game you more so point to, well, Darius Garland missed 5 free throws, which he's never done in any other game as a professional basketball player. That's not going to happen again. So like there are all these little things, but you look at the one at home against Indiana, both losses to Atlanta around Thanksgiving. Like you kind of felt like that was part of the problem there. And I actually equate struggling with that maybe a little bit more to a focus type of thing. And I just don't know that necessarily for a full 48 minutes of all 82 regular season teams, players are able to stay completely focused. And I think that when the postseason arrives, that becomes a non-issue. So I just don't know that that's necessarily the thing. Now, if you want to point to how certain guys like upper tier perimeter defenders can handle maybe Darius Garland, maybe Donovan Mitchell in postseason, I think that is a conversation, particularly when you look at Drew Holiday with the Boston Celtics and the numbers that he has defending Darius Garland at times in Garland's career. Like that could be maybe the thing, but I don't view it as, oh man, Anthony Black really got into Ty Jerome in the third quarter of a game in March. The Cavs might be in trouble dealing with ball pressure there. Like, I think that to me is maybe more of a focused thing. Maybe it's more of a, hey, it was a 1 o'clock Sunday game. Was the intensity level at a playoff level? No, it wasn't. Like, I think that those things matter when you're having that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I do think these small guards would much rather, you hang back and play a conservative defense because they are, one, just faster. They can get to the spot better than your big can in a drop coverage. Like they're going to get to that spot, hit to their floater range. And when you're backpedaling against the Cavs, you're just kind of toast because of how well Darius and Donovan changed directions, to say nothing of the other supplementary pieces on this team. Whereas when you are kind of in their grill, when you're pushing them back, one, it gets a little harder for them to let their tempo kind of control the game. You're kind of imposing your tempo on them. And then also, they're just smaller. So it's a little bit harder for them to hit that guy on the short roll when you're making the pass 33 feet from the basket as opposed to 20 feet from the basket. Jared Allen's catching it at the top of the three-point arc and has to make 3 dribbles on the way to the hoop before he makes a decision instead of, one step and then either a pass or a floater. So, like, I do think there's something to it. I do think it's the first thing that teams will try against them. I just am not sure, how, to your point, like, I think you're still going to have the right personnel to do it. And really, like, not to oversimplify, it always is going to come down to just how good are you at, like, how many different kind of looks can you throw at this team? Because I don't think 7 games of ball pressure is necessarily the answer.
No, and I think that's a hard thing for opponents to keep up for 7 games too, because we look at this as because it is a thing that has affected the Cavs. It's the lens that we view it through. But how repeatable is that to do that 7 times in 2 weeks for 48 minutes? Like that's a really difficult thing to do, especially when the entire game is at a much more intense level in the postseason, because the regular season I mean, the effort level is obviously really high from every team every single night. And that's something that probably doesn't get talked about enough, but the intensity level isn't at the same in the regular season it is in the postseason. It becomes harder to defend full court in the postseason than it does. And the defense in the half court, I think, becomes tougher in the postseason. And I think that actually makes it tougher to pick up full court because you're having to expend so much energy on every single possession that sometimes defensively, it might make sense to save that energy and just defend in the half court because you're going to have to do more there anyways.
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum, for this team. And in some ways, it does make me think, Danny, that as much as I don't relish the idea of an Orlando first round series, because they're so physical, because they're so tough, and and for a team this good, really just there's a bit of like, let's just get through this first round or two as unscathed as humanly possible. That's part of the reason I'm not crazy excited about playing Giannis in the second round. Do you think that this is actually kind of an iron, like a whetstone almost kind of matchup for the Cavs, where if you do play them in the first round and you do figure out how to get your offense going to the way it was earlier in this season series where the Cavs put up 120 points plus in the first 2 games, if you can prove that, hey, your ball pressure actually doesn't mean anything to us, we're going to get buckets on you. Do you think that's more valuable, even if the series is a little more physical and hard fought, than playing a team like I don't know, like the Bulls or the Hawks.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think that we learned this during the run from 2015 to 2018, where we would just routinely see this franchise sweep through the first round. And you want to be able to conserve that energy for second, third, fourth round playoff games. Like, you don't want to spend more time in the first round than you have to. I actually look at the Orlando matchup as, yes, maybe that series would be a little bit more physical, but I look at it as the Magic just don't have an answer to what the Cavs present from a math perspective. Like, the Cavs are going to shoot way more threes than the Magic. They're going to make way more threes than the Magic. So yesterday's game for Orlando was the 9th time this season they've shot 40% or better from three in a single game. Like, that's just not something that ever happens. They are the worst 3-point shooting team in basketball. They're not going to be able to keep up with the Cavs offensively. I think it would be a really short series because an average performance from the Cavs on offense is a 10 to 15 point victory over the Magic's average performance. Like, that's just the way that I view that. Yes, it would be more physical. I think it would be a good hump for the Cavs to get over, really, just to prove how much different they are. And I understand that the Magic, as you mentioned, have had a season from hell. Like, they've not had their full allotment of key players. Jalen Suggs is not going to come back this year. Like, they are a team that is going to look different if they make the playoffs than they did in the 4-5 matchup that we all watched 7 games of last year. But I do think that getting past that team, particularly in a quick fashion, which I would expect to happen, I think that would be a really good sign for this team. Just like, even if it's internally feeling, see, we are so much different than we were last year. Like, if they can look in the mirror and say that after a first round series win in 4 or 5 games, as opposed to 7 games that it was last year, I think that could be a good thing for them.
I think so too. And I do think the kind of the personnel that Orlando presents do help you solve teams like, they're going to play a very similar style to, in terms of their ability to switch, in terms of their ability to close out on your 3-point shooters and keep you from getting your attempts up against teams like Boston. I'm not as worried about New York and Milwaukee on the defensive end of the floor, obviously, but I do think there is some value in having a get the offense going in a tough defensive series kind of thing. And to some extent, it is like a bit of a proof of concept. And no matter what data we see and no matter what tape we see, I do think every Cavs fan is going to have that lingering concern in the back of their mind of, like, when the pressure gets ratcheted up and when the scout gets good and teams are really locked in, is this Cavs offense going to score at the level they've been scoring in the regular season, or at least in the neighborhood? Because we're 2 years in to pretty precipitous drop-offs from their regular season average in the postseason. I would continue to argue that last year probably deserves a little bit more grace than that. I'm not sure any team played 2 tougher matchups on the other side of the floor than Orlando, than Boston, and very shorthanded versus Boston, mind you. But we still haven't seen this team just go for a 4 or 5 game series, put up 115, 125, 120. It's been a race to 100 for this team in the playoffs. So I do think there's something. I don't know. I kind of go both ways because it would kind of be nice just to play Atlanta and just be like, all right, let's just score. Let's just play it. Let's just play our basketball. Let's play. Let's get a taste of what focused playoff basketball looks like without any risk of fits and starts in an accidentally long series.
Right. So I do think it would be a good thing for the Cavs to play the Magic because they get that test on the one end of the floor where, we're going to see exactly what their elite level offense looks like against a really good defense. And the Magic are still a top 5 defense. They haven't necessarily played like a top 5 defense since, the turn of the calendar to 2025, but they've been,
who is their best defender.
Yes, he has very much changed that team. I think on both ends of the floor. He's been a big absence for them. But I think that this would be an opportunity for the Cavs to get a taste at playing a really good defense without necessarily being totally threatened on the other end of the floor. Orlando is 28th in offense. They're not a team that's going to be able to win a race to, for the most part, 110 points. Maybe it's not the first to 125 points the way that some regular season games have been for the Cavs. And the Cavs have been, since February 1st, the best defense in basketball. So that conversation is very much different now than it was maybe in November or January when they were not playing great defensively. But I think that you look at this and say, okay, maybe that defense in Orlando is going to find a way to slow down the Cavs a little bit. But maybe they're not scoring 125 points a night in the playoffs, but they're scoring 117 points a night. And like that, I think against an Orlando offense, which is a tough watch at times, I think to put it nicely, I think that would be more than enough. And I think that would be a confidence builder as saying, okay, we might not see a tougher defense in the Eastern Conference than what we see in the first round against Orlando. Then they can say, and we figure that out. So now we can figure out anything else the rest of the way, whether it's against Milwaukee, Boston, Indy, Detroit, whoever they could see the rest of the way in the Eastern Conference playoffs. And then, in the finals, like OKC's defense is really, really good too, but you worry about that if and when you get there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I would rather see them conquer on the offensive end rather than, like, I don't know if I would learn as much from a first round series against Chicago where they, locked down on defense and held Chicago to nothing as much as I would learn if they were able to score on an Orlando, right? I do think there is something better to be learned there. Speaking of the race to 100, Danny, how many times have the Cavs scored less than 100 points this year?
Oh man, it can't be many. I mean, it has to be what, 3?
One.
It happened against just the game against Indy at home.
Just the one against Indy
that they lost.
They've had 5 of their 6 losses are their lowest scoring outings. They so like it just goes to show they have 2 losses 3 losses. Nope, bad counting. Whatever. They don't have a ton of losses when they score over 110.
They don't have a ton of losses, period.
No, they sure don't. But yeah, 5 of their 11 are in their very worst offensive outings. Really, they've only had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games with less than 110. So I do think like that is where I will start. That is going to be the standard I kind of expect for the postseason. Like it's so weird to have this team that's kind of been this electric on offense and still me having some of these questions on offense. I guess I should ask, like, do you share my concerns? Do you have that little needle of doubt in the back of your mind of like, are they gonna tighten up a little bit? Is the machine not gonna look so sexy in the postseason?
No, because I think that they would have to tighten up so much. Like, I don't know that I would expect them to have an offensive rating. Right. I don't know that I would expect them to have a postseason offensive rating of 122, which is what it's around right now for the regular season. Like that might be a little high, but I think that if they take a step back offensively, they're still the best offensive team in basketball. Like I think they are the leaders in offensive rating by more than 2 points per 100 possessions, and Denver's the number 2 offense. Like that is a pretty significant gap when you look at things. So if they take a step back and you factor in, okay, well, most other teams are going to take a step back too. Like even if the step back that the Cavs might take on offense in the postseason is bigger, they've built up enough of a buffer that's like, okay, yeah, well, they're like 8 out of 10 offensive game is better than the 9 or 10 out of 10 offensive game for how many other teams in basketball. Like, I think that matters as part of this conversation too. And so much of this is for shooting. Like if the Cavs shoot 32% or better, they've lost from 3-point range. They've lost 4 times this year. They've only lost, if they shoot 32% or better, they have 4 losses on the season. I would expect them from 3-point range to be able to shoot 32% or better most nights. Like they're just, when they hit their shots, they're really, really hard to beat. And I know that is as simple as it gets with basketball. It's a make or miss league. We've all heard that before. But when the Cavs shoot the ball well, they don't lose. Like that's just who this team is.
Yeah, and I do think their high defensive ceiling and them showing that over this last month is important to that. Because, the difference between dropping from a 108, 110 offensive rating to like 100 is pretty brutal. But 120 to like 112, 113, 114 isn't so bad if your defensive rating is also kind of moving commensurate with your offense. Like if your defense is locking down 20% more, but your offense is getting locked down 20% more, you're still in really, really good shape. And you're in a position to do your best work, and Danny, only you can do your best work. Zoom AI Companion can help you do the rest, like automatically taking notes, answering meeting questions, and helping you respond to your coworkers. Available at no additional cost with eligible paid plans. Work happy with Zoom AI Companion. Danny, it's been a wild year, and a really amazing year, including for one Ty Jerome, who was yapping with Paolo Banchero. What did you think of that exchange? I thought it was fun. I feel like the national scene got to see just how much our boy likes to talk.
Right. I mean, that's who Ty has been all year. I think that swagger, if you will, is a part of his game. And I don't know that Ty Jerome is the player that Ty Jerome has become this year without that type of edge that he's found the way to play with on a regular basis. Like, that is part of who he is. He's somebody that is going to talk every single night. And, you got to give him credit. The play that he's had on the floor, and I will be the first to raise my hand and say I did not factor in Ty Jerome having this amount of success this year to what I thought the Cavs would be. Like, for me, looking at this team before the season, he was kind of an afterthought. I don't necessarily know how much organizationally the Cavs expected him to contribute. I certainly don't think they expected him to be a guy that's flirting with 50, 40, 90 splits. And I haven't looked at what his free throw percentage is after he missed a few free throws on Sunday, but he's had an incredible year. And I think that he
dropped to 88.5. Ty, no.
Oh, that's tough. That's tough. That was what I thought about when he missed, because he missed three free throws.
Same.
On Sunday. That was immediately what I thought of. Like, man, that's, especially for somebody who doesn't get to the line a ton, those three misses are pretty penal. But I think that he brings an edge that the Cavs kind of need. You need somebody on the floor that plays on a nightly basis that has that sort of attitude. And I think he's been awesome for them in every way imaginable, and better than anyone could have expected.
Yeah, I saw some discourse, in our podcast Discord and a few other spots that they didn't love the Ty minutes after that kind of verbal scuffle. Thought he played a little out of control, and I will kind of say I feel like the Ty out of control and Ty playing the way he's played all year kind of exists on a razor's edge. Like, I feel like sometimes to me, I felt like that was playing the result a little bit. Like, yeah, he kind of had a rough second half, missed the 3 free throws, had a couple really rough turnovers. But I also think, like, he's been making a really, really high degree of difficulty decisions all year. And, like, I think, like, if he's able to loop that crazy cross-court pass over to the left wing, then we're talking about what a great pass it was. If he finishes a couple of those crazy floaters, then we're really happy. I mean, the free throws, I just don't know what you say. You just missed free throws, which, we saw Darius Garland miss free throws. Right. Do you agree with that? Do you think it was playing the result? Do you think that was an opportunity where, if you're coaching the team, maybe you give a little more Isaac Okoro run or something like that, just to change the rhythm on when the game's kind of slipping away from you?
No, because I think that, and we just got done talking about the ball pressure that Orlando was able to present to the Cavs. I think that they needed a little bit more additional, ball handling on the floor. And that's why I think Ty is kind of given that longer leash there, even on a night when he maybe doesn't have his best stuff. And that's going to happen over the course of 82 games. Like, I don't think he should be faulted for not having his best game of the season on Sunday, but I thought that the shooting that he provides, the ball handling, and I know that it wasn't all great. And Ty plays, one of the things that I really, really enjoy about his game is that he plays the game at a much different speed than anybody else. And part of the reason why I've always really loved Darius Garland's game from the time that he first got to Cleveland is it felt like he had the ability to play slow, right? Like, he could kind of slow things down and still find his spots and use a change of pace that can be really hard for other guys to get to. And it feels like Ty doesn't necessarily always play at that change of pace, but he plays at that change of pace far more frequently than anybody that I can think of.
Ty can play slow and he can play slower.
Right. Yes, exactly. I mean, how many guys get into the paint slower than Ty Jerome does? And it works so perfectly because defenses are not used to it. Like, it's such a hard thing to defend because we think about athleticism being, oh, this guy is just bigger, stronger, faster. Sometimes athleticism can be about changing speed and changing directions. And when you think about changing speed, you think about going from fast to fast. Ty goes from sometimes fast to slower. And I think that is just as difficult as a change to defend against as going from fast to faster. And I think that's one of the beautiful parts of his game.
Yeah. I mean, you won't find a bigger Ty Jerome fan than me. I really do think he should have legitimate 6 Man of the Year consideration. I think most of the stats,
I agree,
when you look at the per 36 is right next to Peyton Pritchard, who's going to win it. Apparently all you got to do to win 6 Man of the Year is play in Boston. With Brogdon winning it a couple years ago. Any really niche award. We gave Depoy to Marcus Smart. Out of control. These Boston media. But I do think that he was a guy who I was, more than happy to see get the minutes he got, even if the results were a little up and down in the second half. And like I also would argue, like for those that wanted more Okoro minutes, like Cavs did great on Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero. Like even without Evan, and I thought without no Evan, Okoro was going to be really, really needed to throw on a Paolo or a Franz, just because you need a lot of warm bodies to throw at them. I felt like they did great on those guys, and I don't think that Paolo or Franz really ever got comfortable on the offensive end of the ball. So it was a rare game. Normally, I feel like when I see, losses always bring out rotation criticisms. For me, I just didn't really see it in this one. I thought the Tristan minutes were a little tough, but I mean, they won those minutes.
Right.
So
right.
like,
I
don't know. I just don't know how to feel.
Even the first half minutes for Okoro, I think the Cavs were a minus in those minutes. Those minutes did not go well. He might have been like a minus 13 in 7 minutes. And of course, that was when Orlando went on its run, and that's not Isaac Okoro's fault. And after the game, Kenny Atkinson said that was him not playing in the second half was sort of a victim of circumstance thing. So if you remember, Tristan was at the scorer's table to check in for Jarrett Allen with about 3 minutes left in the third quarter. And the next whistle was Jarrett Allen got fouled and had to go to the free throw line. So, of course, you can't check in for a guy that's shooting free throws. So Jarrett ended up playing a longer stint, which means Tristan didn't get on the floor until later. And then instead of having Isaac Okoro come in and maybe play some Dean Wade at the 5 minutes early in the fourth quarter, the Cavs didn't do that because Tristan's run hadn't been very long yet. And then they were ready to go back to Jarrett Allen. So that's kind of the reason, too, that you look at as, okay, maybe that's why Isaac Okoro wasn't on the floor in the second half. And, I think that with what he would have been tasked doing, I don't know that that's where the Cavs needed the help. Like, I think they needed help to make shots. And Isaac is certainly pre-shoulder injury was shooting the leather off the basketball, hasn't been as good since injuring that right shoulder, and that's a really difficult thing to come back from in the middle of the season. But they needed more offense, and I just don't know that you're looking at Isaac Okoro to provide that in that spot.
No, I'm with you. I mean, I really think, if you're looking for a bit more space, a little more shooting, a little bit more creation, you're going to play Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill the majority of those minutes, and that's what Kenny did. Sam has a nightmare shooting game. He misses his first 6 threes, and sometimes you just have games like that where things just aren't falling. And it is always important to say, like, people don't like it when we do the open 3-point stats, but they matter. And the Cavs shot 5 of 14 on wide open threes. They shot 4 of 18 on slightly contested threes. So, 9 of 32 on open or on wide open or somewhat open shots is like, that's just a tough hill to climb. They didn't. I thought Orlando did do a lot of interesting stuff, and like one thing I will say is this was a game where you miss Evan on the offensive end of the floor.
100%. I thought that they missed this playmaking more than anything on offense. Like I think a big part of his success this year has obviously been he's been more aggressive in seeking out his own shot. He's been more aggressive going to the basket. He's been far less hesitant, I think, beyond the arc shooting the basketball. But what he's been good at his entire career, I think, has been the playmaking thing, and that's probably been a little bit underrated from him. But in watching that game, especially as you talk about with the ball pressure, it's like, okay, well, how would this offense look different if Evan's making a few plays and finding open shooters? How would things look different for, Donovan Mitchell in particular, who spends a lot of time on the floor with Evan Mobley? Like, how would that have changed his game that he had on Sunday? I thought they missed him. And it's easy to say this in a game where they lose giving up 108 points. Like, it was not a bad defensive effort by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought it was clear they missed him a ton on offense. And I don't want to say they don't miss the defensive player of the year on defense, because that wouldn't be entirely true, but they played well enough on that end of the floor. Be like, you could take the day off defensively and you didn't necessarily feel it a ton. And then offense was like, I would have liked that there.
Well, yeah, I feel like the thing with Evan on offense is because everything else in the machine has worked so well this year, it's felt like his offensive growth has been the straw that breaks the camel's back a lot in a lot of these games. You look at that Memphis game where he hits 3 straight threes and It just felt like
Right.
the game was over right away. Like he hit those 3 threes. And
It was.
And I'm like, all right, we're done. We're done here. He's bullying Zach Edey off the floor. And, that's been so much of what he's done has been that extra piece to push them over the top. And very rarely has he had to be the guy that's raising the floor for the offense. But Orlando made a scheme change in this game. Jared Allen just had a parade of free runs in the pick and roll in that first half, and they were crashing down hard. They were taking advantage of the fact that the Cavs weren't hitting, because again, the Cavs were generating a lot of open looks, but they were crashing down hard. Darius had 5 turnovers. Donovan had 3. I'll bet 5 or 6 of those were in the second half of just them trying to hit a pocket pass to Jarrett, and Orlando crashing in and forcing and hitting him early. And if you're able to get Evan the ball, on those kind of slips at the top of the arc, or running an inverted pick and roll, or whatever it may be, there are things that, as good as Jarrett's gotten with the ball, you still don't want him taking 5 or 6 dribbles in a possession. You want one dribble, step, layup, or floater, or pass. Like that's just where Jarrett's game is. But I felt like with no Evan on the floor, Orlando just kind of said, "Hey, whatever you want to do, we're just not going to give you those 2 steps. We're gonna make you beat us in another way." And I feel like that's part of why the Cavs offense short circuited, is because the thing that was so successful went away, and then it's like, okay, well now what? Because running off ball stuff, no one chases harder than Orlando off ball. And no one's more physical blowing up screens than Orlando. And I do think like that is where Evan raises the floor of the offense as much as he raises the ceiling, because he can just do different stuff that you just don't get to do when he's not on the floor.
Right. And I think that having another guy that can too go and get his own stuff, like go and get his own basket too. And that's been a big plus of adding DeAndre Hunter, is having somebody else that's a little bit bigger, that has that wingspan that can kind of create for himself. Like I think he's been really awesome in that area, but I think that they missed Evan's playmaking. They missed him getting downhill to the basket, being aggressive. And I don't know that Orlando can make the same adjustments they made after that first quarter where the Cavs scored 38 points if Evan Mobley's on the floor. Like I think that game really speaks to his importance on that end. And to your point about the turnovers, Darius and Donovan combined to have 8 turnovers on Sunday. 7 of them came in the second half. So it was a big adjustment that Orlando made. And I don't know that the Magic deserve all of the credit for that. Like I think some of that was a little bit of a lack of maybe attention to detail on offense, but it's something that just Evan Mobley, he solves a lot of problems for this team. Like he really, truly does.
Yeah, they're 1-3 in their last 4 without Evan. In games Evan has played, they're on a 73 win pace. And if he had played all 82, and that doesn't include the Miami game he left in the first quarter. So like, I mean, clearly they miss him. Are you at the point now where you would say he's their most important player, like the guy who is most crucial for them to do what they want to do? Obviously, it's hard in tight margins here.
Right. I think it kind of depends on the matchup. I was having a conversation with somebody about this a little bit earlier today, and I think for the Cavs to win the finals I think they're going to have to get through Boston in the Eastern Conference. Like I really, truly feel strongly that's going to be the Eastern Conference Finals. And I think for the Cavs to win that series, Donovan Mitchell probably has to be the best player in that series for the Cavs because of how well he's played against Boston, just because of some of the defensive stuff against Darius. And I think some of the numbers with Evan against Kristaps Porzingis have also not been great. I think that has to be a Donovan Mitchell series. And say they get past that and OKC's waiting for them on the other end. That's the series I think Evan needs to be the best player in the Cavs. Like, I just think it kind of depends. It's a matchup dependent thing. Like, he is obviously vital to winning, I think, any series in the postseason. I think like his importance level varies maybe a little bit depending on who the opponent is too, and just how things look stylistically.
I think it goes to speak to how well these top 4 dudes fit together, that is the answer. Because I think you're right. I was getting ready to just say it's Evan, but I think you already swayed me off of that to say that it is.
That's what I'm here for.
Thanks, buddy. I do think it is going to be inherently matchup based, and I do think it's reflective of how these dudes paper over each other's weaknesses. You know, you could certainly make the case that it's Evan, but to your point, if you're in Boston and you don't have Donovan Mitchell for a game, and you're like, who's gonna just create a bucket for us? Because Darius isn't a great bucket generator on his own. Evan is not a great bucket generator on his own. Jared is not a great bucket generator on his own. All great scorers, all great, very helpful players, but they're not just the ISO star that Donovan can be, especially against that Boston team. And with if Darius wasn't in the game, we'd probably be like, can someone get us into the offense? So it's just like everyone covers up. I don't think any of those four guys, and certainly at the top three, I don't think any of those three have like horrific, glaring, like 5-alarm fire weaknesses, but they do have things that maybe they're like a B- at. And the playoffs require a lot of A+, and so the fact that these four, I do think it is so core to their identity that all of these guys can have all these different A+ elements to their game. And there's been a lot of talk about depth in the postseason and top end depth, which is a bit of an oxymoron, but I do think it's a real thing where like having, that's why I think Boston won the title last year, because they had 4 or 5 guys who could literally take over a half with their play. And I think the Cavs are right there with that top end depth. They have enough guys who can get to an A+ in whatever the game needs them to have, that, they have that high ceiling. So
right,
go ahead.
They have the ability to, and I think this is one of the best parts about this team, is that on how many games can you look at and in big games and just be like, Jared Allen was one of the biggest reasons why the Cavs won this game. Like I can think of the OKC game in Cleveland, that they won that game because Jared Allen had 25 points and however many rebounds he had in that game. Like, he was spectacular. Or how many games did they win because Donovan Mitchell was just a flat out superstar? Like, you look at the game they just won in Boston a few weeks ago. That was absolutely part of it. Darius Garland has games like that. Evan Mobley has games like that. Like, they just, the top end depth, I think, is a great way to look at it, because there are not many teams in the NBA that have the luxury of the 4th best player on the team is somebody that is as good as Jared Allen and also as unselfish as Jared Allen. Like, I think that, and he won't do this because this is not who Jared Allen is, and that's part of the reason why the Cavs work. Like, Jared is a good enough player to be like, I should get the ball more. Like, I should be scoring 22, 25 points a game, but that's not who Jared Allen is. And that's part of the thing that makes his team so special, is that he is that talented and doesn't necessarily require some of the maintenance that maybe other guys of his caliber in other situations might.
I was really thinking, like, I was thinking that by the end of Jared's tenure, he might be my favorite Cav ever. Just in terms of his complete unique perspective, his general demeanor, what a good dude he is. Like, I will always remember that poster where he tried to do the "I'm me, I'm him," and then he breaks out laughing because he can't even hold on to trying to be a hard ass for more than 5 minutes or for more than 5 seconds. It's just immediately a collapse. Yeah, they really do have it all, and like, I do think it really. And maybe I'm over indexing on last year's title because that's what we do, right? We always try to learn maybe too many lessons from the most recent success. But I do think, like, I don't really think it matters that much how good the middle class of your roster is if you don't have 3 or 4 guys, or you have a Jokic or something like that who can just consistently be supernova. But if you don't have at least 2 dudes who can take over a game for stretches, who can dominate a quarter or 2 quarters, then I just think you're dead in the water. Like, I think so much of what we've seen from this season, and like, yeah, you have to give Ty his flowers. You have to give guys like Max Strus their flowers, and even Karras and Niang before they were traded their flowers. But I do think so much of their success is built around the ecosystem that the stars of the team provide. Like, it's just not, like, I've said it a lot this year, I just don't think it's that hard to play your best basketball for the Cleveland Cavaliers this year.
No, I couldn't agree with that more. And I think a big part of that too is this team when they're playing their best, and even sometimes when they're not playing their best. Like think to the buzzer beater that DeAndre Hunter hit just before halftime on Sunday, and how fun
I'm so
that
mad
was
that
for
that
that
got
team.
wiped out by the loss.
Right, but like they have moments like that, and it seems like this team just genuinely enjoys playing basketball together. And I think that's a really rare and special thing that should probably be a little bit like celebrated more than it is by the public, by fans. Just like this is so special because you don't often see this, and it doesn't last forever. But the way that this team genuinely seems to love and care and enjoy playing basketball with each other is a really, really cool thing to watch on a regular basis too.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I spent my whole life hearing people complain that the NBA players don't care, are only out for themselves, don't play defense, don't try hard, and so I imagine everyone I grew up with must love this Cavaliers team, and the entire country must be falling in love with this Cavaliers team. Oh wait, no, they're just complaining about something else. That's because for whatever reason, this is a sport
That's how it goes.
that foists the most bad faith complaints. But yeah, it's been an amazing season. It's been a lot of fun, even after a loss. It almost does wake you up to how fun the year is. When we're like, oh wait, I felt like this like 20 plus times last year. Ew, you know, like
Right.
it does really. We've been very spoiled, and I did want, before we said goodbye, I did want to just take a look into the next week for the Cavs, because Tourney's in town, baby. Cavs are going on the road. We've got a 5-game road trip at LA, at Sacramento, at Phoenix, at Utah, at Portland. 4 of those 5 games very late, starting at 10 o'clock Eastern time or later. Before we dive in, I'm going to give my forever precursor. If things aren't going well, or maybe they're not going the way you want them to, and you as a fan are finding yourself getting a little grumpy, drawing big conclusions, I just want to remind you, you're sleepy. You're staying up to 1:30 in the morning, watching basketball, and then probably taking an hour to wind down after the game, so you're really going to bed at like 2:30, and then you're waking up at 7:30 to go work out, get ready to go to work, and then you're just not sleeping enough, so you're grumpy. So just remind yourself, dude, am I really mad or am I just tired? All right, preamble over, Danny. What do you expect from this West Coast trip? You know, on one hand, this team has bounced back unbelievably well from losses, but on the other, it's just a grueling margin. This is about as grueling of a trip as they're going to have.
Right. So I think that Tuesday's game is the one I'm most interested in because one, it is the one right after a loss, and two, it comes against a really good defense. The Clippers are third in defensive rating entering games on Monday for the entire season. Like that is how they have built the record that they have. That is why they're in the playoff picture out west, is because they're a really good defensive team. After that, I kind of think this could serve as a get right trip for the Cavs offense, because you look at, yes, Sacramento is on the second edge of a back to back. The Kings will be rested. The Cavs won't be, but they're a below average defense. The Blazers have been a better defense lately, but they're still 16th for this season. Phoenix has the worst vibes in the NBA and one of the worst defenses too. Gee, imagine that. And then Utah is the second worst defense in basketball. Like I think that if the Cavs have not been great offensively,
are the wheels off on that campaign.
oh my goodness, are they ever?
I heard Walker Kessler took like 6 threes in the game the other day. I was like, oh my God.
It's just, it is, they have a goal out there, and that goal is not to beat the Cavs next Sunday. But the Cavs have
Sundiata
been
Gaines is not walking through those doors, Danny.
what a callback. Oh my goodness. But the Cavs have been 15th in offense in the month of March, and that's not who they are as a basketball team. I think they're in a little bit of a shooting malaise, if you will. And I think that going against some of the defenses that they're going to see over the next week and change is something that could serve as a bit of an antidote towards their shooting struggles as of late. And I would expect by the time they return home next week that they will look much more like the team that has been number one in offense virtually the entire season than what we've seen lately.
All right, Danny, before we go, I just got, because we're probably not going to have you back on before the end of the season because there ain't that much season left. I got to ask you, what's this team's final record?
the final regular season record, I think they are going to go 68-14. I think that they will lose 3 more games this year. I don't know that they will necessarily play everybody in some of those losses. I think that we could see some games down the stretch where the Cavs value being a little bit rested and healthy for the postseason, as opposed to going all out to win every single regular season game. I think they're going to get to 68 wins and set a new franchise record for the best regular season in Cavs history.
Brother, I think I'm right there with you. I gotta say, I was really hoping for 70. 70 just felt like such a special number to reach, and obviously it's not out of question. They can only lose 1 more game, but they've had enough insane win streaks this season that I'm not counting it out. But I do think 68 feels like a really good number. 14 losses over a basketball season is bananas, and would be one of the greatest seasons in the history of the sport, which reflects how good this team is. So, I think it's a very reasonable prediction, and very fair, and would still put them well. Now, here's the other question: is do they hold off OKC for the number 1 overall record in the league?
I think 68 wins would do that. I think that OKC is probably going to win 66 if I had to bet. And I think the craziest thing about what you just said is I think they're going to win 68 games. That's a pretty reasonable prediction there.
Yeah, we're being measured and cautious observers of the game. All right, Danny, before we go ahead and plug your stuff. You do unbelievable work, and really appreciate having you on.
Well, I appreciate that. You can find me every day wherever you get your podcasts, over at Locked On Cavs, coming your way just about every single day at this point, weekends included. And you can find everything I write about the Cleveland Cavaliers at my Substack, The Inside Shot. Links for that and everything I do can be found on my social media at Real D Cunningham on Twitter or Danny Cunningham on Blue Sky. All
right, thank you so much. Go subscribe to Danny Cunningham Substack. It is unbelievable. It's some of the best writing that you're going to see covering this team. It's really nice to get that extra perspective on top of the pods. Also, highly recommend your beginning of the week whip around pods with beat reporters or people who cover each individual team. I think those are some of my most informational and kind of quick digestive snapshots of what the Cavs week is going to look like. So thank you so much for coming on, Danny, and really appreciate you. And I really appreciate you, listeners and viewers of the Chase Down. If you'd like to support the podcast, go ahead and subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit the subscribe button on the Cavs official YouTube channel. Go ahead and like this video if you're feeling kind. My deepest and best wishes go to my poor sick co-host. We love you so much, Justin. Get better. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And as always, go Cavs!